Today, Museocity will be meeting Viviana Checchia for the series Women as Pioneers of Change in the World of Museums, Heritage and New Creative Practices. Viviana Checchia is a young Italian curator, critic and lecturer, currently working as public engagement curator at the Centre for Contemporary Art in Glasgow, where she has researched and created various public programs and art commissions. Viviana has a strong commitment to curatorial research and practice in the global and local development of socially engaged art practice. For the past 8 years, she has co-directed Vessel, a platform based in the southern region of Puglia in Italy, for critical discussion on the cultural, social, economic and political impact of working with local communities. With Anna Santamauro, co-director of Vessel in 2013, she received the ICI Daedalus Research Award for her studies in the US on the groundbreaking and pioneering work of Mary Jane Jacob, who is also an interviewee of Museocity in the same series. Just to mention some of the projects Viviana has worked on since she's been in Glasgow, they include The House That Heals the Soul, 2017, along with the curatorial team of CCA and with a group of asylum seekers, Other Libraries. While advocating for civic practice addressing social and political issues, she has also curated solo artists' shows. At the CCA, she curated the first ever UK exhibition of the Dutch artist Jonas Staal, entitled, revealingly, The Scottish European Parliament. Staal's work explores issues such as the self-determination of peoples, or let's say unrepresented nations, thus creating public debate and introducing new concepts and language through art. Viviana, I would like to begin by asking you about your present role at the CCA in Glasgow, which is a city which you did not know before you went to Glasgow. And so how did you approach a city that it was completely unknown to you, having no knowledge of the communities or the territorial issues in Glasgow?
So thank you so much for inviting me. And I really like this first question. It helps me to open up a whole series of issues and approaches I would like to engage with in this conversation. Well, first of all, when I arrived, my position had basically never existed before. Therefore, I was the first public engagement curator at CCA, and this was a great advantage. It meant that I could shape the program and I could try to define that role in the way I wanted. What I tried to do was to try to respect the profile of the institution, as well as the nature of the city where I was going to intervene, and also the ecosystem of the arts that was already present in Glasgow. This wouldn't be unusual for me, like is somehow the approach I always have when I interact with the site, responding to the conditions that I encounter on a societal level, on a political level, on an artistic level. Sometimes is by enriching what is already there, sometimes is by trying to respond in a provocative way, and so to challenge what is already there. So it's not always a very peaceful interaction with the site. It can be very tense, it just depends. In the case of Glasgow, first of all, like I got welcomed by an amazing team at the CCA, and the director, Francis McKee, understood the way in which I would deal with the site, and also my curatorial approach towards located or situated knowledge. And therefore, it left me some time at the very beginning of the position to study what was going on, to observe and analyze everything that was happening actually around the CCA meaning the location of the CCA, but also in town and further afield in Scotland. And so after months of silent observation, that was accompanied with lots of meetings and lots of different activities that would see me more as a participant than as a deliverer, like an organizer. I started then to really create my program. And the program was really responsive to the issues that I was observing. So on one side, a strong attention towards food, which was already tackled by the director when there was no public engagement curator, and they had started a project with a local community. So I wanted to somehow carry on that legacy, and as well as a response to a site that is super connected with the academic development in the UK. For instance, Glasgow has got universities as well as the Glasgow School of Art, like lots of different hubs where international students are coming and studying. And I thought that was another factor to respond to, as well as mobility issues. So Glasgow is the first most popular, biggest dispersal city of all the UK, meaning that there is the highest percentage of asylum claimants and refugees and migrants in a city, living in a city, and therefore then starting to be integrated within the local population as well. As well as at the time when I arrived, the area where the CCA is located was entirely changed. It was going through a process of regeneration, and I wanted to respond to that. And on another, like a different angle, like starting from an approach that is potentially more connected with my personal interest in social engagement practice, I created a program in which I would reflect the development of social engagement practice within Scotland, understanding how that had been for decades and in different sectors, how it had been developed, and how I could contribute in my position at the CCA. So as you can see, there were various different things, some of them just responding to issues that were happening and in my opinion needed to be addressed also artistically. In other cases, it was urgencies, like really the site where we were was entirely changing. And in other cases, it was more like how my personal interests can marry the place where I'm going to be settled for maybe 3 or 4 years of my life.
Yes, of course, you put a lot of things together, but what was the most interesting aspect for you of this discovery of, say, the communities that you worked with or that you chose to work with? What were the most interesting aspects? Was it the communities or you talk about the large asylum claimants community? Was that a surprise? How do they interact with the local communities? What sort of relationships did you find in this area? Things that you could actually work on to integrate policies, or to how could you work with artists in certain areas of the city or with certain communities? Tell me a little bit about the concrete reality.
Okay, this is a very complex question. So certainly, yes, the community I found most interesting is the communities of asylum claimants coming from Puglia, which is the second harbor of arrival within the Mediterranean. It's always been an interest for me, and also I'm an immigrant here.
Strange connections from different parts of the world. The same sort of problems arise in Glasgow as in, say, Puglia.
Exactly, yeah. Which somehow also proves this idea of situated knowledge, not just as like the site, but something that can be located and therefore connecting different places entirely, like super distance and connected with entirely different dynamics, but still having something in common, which is this strong presence of newcomers. So what was interesting for me was to, first of all, trying to observe the strategies that were used by institutions, other institutions, not only in the arts, but also in the third sector, trying to understand in which way this community was really invited to be part of the new Scottish society that we are creating together. And one of the things that I noticed was that most of the time, the approach was based on deficit. So trying to understand what is that they need, what is that community lack, and therefore what is that we can provide. And this would be somehow described by social scientists like Pascal Guillen or artists like Jan van Eswijk as the missionary or the evangelist sort of approach. You need something, and I'm here. I'm stronger than you because I'm an institution. I'm going to give you something. So the first thing I wanted to try to do was to entirely flip this attitude. I'm not richer, I'm not better, I'm not stronger than anybody. These people are very rich, they're very strong, and we should work on their attitude. So how is that the knowledge that they are bringing into the country, which also correspond to food or any sort of cultural derivative. It could be music, or it could be theater, or it could be storytelling. So how is that we can really use that and to create this mixed match of different ideas and potentially new knowledge. But also how is that we can open up our horizon, become more tolerant, understanding diversity in a way that is not just binary systems or dichotomies going on and creating more racism and dividing basically society. And so I really wanted to try to understand how multiculturalism could emerge by simply making or creating a different position for the participants, for the producers, for the institutions involved. Yes, so, sorry.
It's even after what has happened with the statues and Black Lives Matter movement, I mean, it's kind of proved this. A whole series of cultural conventions which are understood by, say, the resident population or the white population to be natural, in inverted commas, when in actual fact so many things are cultural, are language oriented, and hide a lot of implicitly racial or racist attitudes. So I think the idea of turning the tables on culture or received culture is extremely interesting and important today. Another aspect which I think is very important about your work is that you are strongly committed to curatorial projects as opposed to artists' projects. How can you explain, or can you explain, how these two projects are different and how they can combine? Because I think this is also a very important contemporary issue.
I'm not sure if I can explain it fully because it's quite like a long story, but I will try. First of all, I think that they differ in protocols and devices and tools. So curatorial or artistic projects, they are both creative, they can have the same spirit, they can be based on similar mechanisms, but the approach that a curator has in general is the one of an organizer, someone that is actually taking care of the consistency of things, let's say, flowing together, and also becoming a catalyst of actions. So an orchestrator of different ideas and people coming together. I would say that generally within an artistic project, there can be one mind or there can be multiple minds coming together, but I imagine the creative act as something different. I can't really explain that because I'm not an artist and never been trained as an artist. And I think one of the most difficult things to my life is what is art, so it's quite challenging. But I'm really keen in creating a space and a place for curatorial practice, and therefore I tried always to make sure that that's the way in which what I do would be represented. Not only for the label, but also for the integrity of it, the responsibility of it, the relevance of it. Sometimes with artistic projects, they can come and go, they are really dependent on funding. Most of the time the artist can suffer because of the lack of responsibility or ethical concerns of an institution. But in my case instead, because I'm actually acting from within the institution, I'm a curator with an institutional connection and an institutional base, then I can try to use that in order to really make sure that ethically and politically and socially, we don't abandon the community that we have started to work with, or we make sure of the longevity of the project. We try to understand how feasible that can be and sustainable that can be for the future. So it's somehow an in-between a creative role and a political role joined together, as if I'm also acting on behalf of sometimes local councils, or it could be the government, or it could be like community council. So it doesn't matter who I see as my main stakeholders, but I try to keep in mind that I'm just working for them, and I'm trying to fulfill certain desires and certain needs.
I think this is very interesting because it brings a new knowledge and a new horizon to institutions in general, as if institutions have a responsibility which is not just to preserve or to continue in the rather narrow field of fine arts. They have a larger responsibility, which is to the community. And also with respect to the artist, it is a role which is projected into the future more, because as an institution you're trying to create links and networks which will help communities to emerge with time. Sometimes, however, it can happen that the two can enter into conflict. And this is something which I think has to be avoided. It's not easy, but some artists may feel that part of their role is being taken away from them, or does this happen? Has this happened in your experience, or in experiences that you have witnessed?
It hasn't really happened within the CCA or Basel. Mm-hmm. I think one of the main tools that we try to use within Basel and also implemented this for the CCA was really the use of clarity since the very beginning. When the project is in the embryonic stage, which we are discussing and brainstorming, we need to set the premises of what are the aims and objectives and what is that we want to achieve, how, with what means. And once things are clear about where we stand and for whom, then the project generally develops in a way that is comfortable for everybody to understand who is the author, who is the owner, how the project is going to be developed in the future. And most of the time I invite the artist and the institution to think about something that either stays with us for a period of time and then is back to the community, is just for the community, managed by a group of people, or is something that we are supporting and we will probably associate with that idea or with that project for a long period of time until someone else can adopt it. So as a very open sense of authorship and ownership of the projects.
Okay. Thinking about not just, I'm thinking about Italy, but not just Italy, many museums have, or maybe don't have, policies that are inclusive. A of museums talk about how to relate to their communities, to the audience, and to prospective audiences or potential audiences, but have great difficulties in doing this. I see that it happens more in, say, in the UK or in other countries like in the US, with figures like Mary Jane Jacob, who initiated various policies. But working outside the museum is not so easy for a lot of people. How do you think we could make projects, or say formulate ideas that can be useful also for museums, that can help museums to communicate not just their collections, but also what they stand for, or what is maybe lacking on the part of museums in the fact that they are not able so easily to relate to their territory in the way that you are doing in Glasgow?
Okay, I think it's important to clarify here how is that the CCA works, because that would answer partially your question. We operate with a model that we call open source. It means that the majority of our program is actually not programmed by the CCA, but is programmed by other organizations, collectives, independent artists, citizens in general. So we produce a lot, meaning that our building is hosting lots of events that are hosted by other people. And we call that open source. In logistical terms, it means that anybody can use our spaces for free, and they can use our communication channels, and they will be supported by a member of staff in order to deliver their activities. And if they need technicians or install team support, they would either come with their own human resources, or they would pay an extra cost for someone that CCA can offer. So by doing that, we have a program that varies from workshops offered by the Red Cross to concerts with the BBC, for instance, as well as theater workshops for kids, or the Festival of Mental Health, or a Festival of Short Movies. So it really, really covers a range of different formats, different interests, different topics. By doing that, the spirit of the institution is really connected with the city. Instead of us trying to imagine what is that the city would like to see or attend at the CCA, the people are already programming inside the CCA. So whatever happens in there is something that someone from the public already wants. So this is really helpful. It's a very different model from other institutions that I know. And it helped me for the public engagement program, because obviously the position of the CCA was already open to the city. It was really porous. It was getting topics, ideas from the city and representing what is really happening in the city. And what I started to do was simply to go out the building and try to reach out more people and try to identify that open source approach, not only with the building of the CCA, but with other venues, by basically trying to swap resources with other organizations, bars, restaurants, community centers, and tell them this is what we can offer, like the know-how of the CCA and sometimes funding, for instance, and let's figure out how is that we can combine our strengths in order for your place to become even more open to local issues and local communities. So, and this is what I've been doing, enlarging more and more and more the impact of the CCA in the old city of Glasgow. But I must admit that the dynamics of connection with the city were already there thanks to the open source.
Well, I think that sounds very exciting though. Do you think it would be possible to have a similar approach in Italy with, on the part of museums, the fact of engaging with local communities and local issues and becoming like a place of reference for debates, for public. I'm sure that this could happen. I think it needs a change of mindset, but I'm sure it would be or could be very beneficial for a lot of Italian museums in overcoming the gap. There's such a big gap sometimes between what museums feel or perceive that their role should be and how it could be simply opening up without, so the whole idea of open source could be something which to think about.
I presented my work for the ICOM, the conference, International Conference of Museums in Florence 2 years ago now. And I was quite badly attacked. This idea didn't find a very florid soil in Italy. But I would also say—
conservative country for some things, for other things not. But I think in the museum culture, it probably is, and maybe there are good reasons for this, but I'm sure it would help a lot of museums to overcome this, these kind of, a big step which somehow divides people who go into a museum and the people who don't. And I think it's a great shame, because in the end, the whole cultural scenario is a loser in this way. So I think maybe yeah. I'm sure your ideas will become more mainstream slowly, or maybe not so slowly. Well,
I would like to say something about that, because I think it's really important for us to understand that models are not always applicable to any ecosystem. So the reason why this model is very successful in Glasgow, in Scotland. Mm-hmm. Center I work for is not a museum. We don't have a collection. So also the priorities of what we do for the city or the country are different than the ones of, for instance, the National Galleries in Scotland. At the same time, whenever we present this model abroad, people get excited. They think that is actually very good, that could be applicable. And the risk there is that it can easily get neoliberalized. Mm-hmm. So this model is there because there is a lack of money. Like, we don't pay a rent for the building. We pay £1 per year. That's it. The building belongs to our core funder, which is Creative Scotland. And because we do have the building, but we don't have enough money to program, then we thought of this model, because it means that by us giving more space to the people who really need space to rehearse, to host an event, or to have a gathering, then we can share what we have got, which is the building, though we don't have money, but they can apply for external resources. If this gets transformed in everybody works for free, then it becomes like a tragic, actually, a model of abuse rather than development. And that's a risk. It's a risk not just in Italy, everywhere, because people get easily attracted by the benefit of an open source model. And they sometimes don't really estimate the level of dependency that it can create, and also the bad practice that can come along if this model gets entirely captured by a capitalist way of working within the arts. So that's one thing. And also, on the other hand, it seems just nice and glorious and super enriching, because we are in touch with so many different people, but it's also a very, very tiring practice. It means that you are constantly there, vigilant, observer of whatever happens around you, and trying to capture all these things and also to respond to the different needs. And within the arts, sometimes we are really used to a specific glossary, to modus operandi that are always the same, even like just certain sort of behaviors, ways of using the public space. And then all of a sudden, when we face entirely different sort of targets and different dictionaries and different ways of even looking at what is a public space or what is the institution, for instance, then it creates a clash. And so having to reset every day to try to understand how to be open and very tolerant to anybody understanding of who we are, how we can help, and what we can do together, it is quite tiring. So it also needs like, you know, somehow an effort from the institution and the curatorial side to understand that, okay, by doing this, I'm not just bringing in lots of different people, but I'm also bringing in lots of different profiles, different cultures, different ways of living, and I will need to be very flexible. I need to adjust to this. And if I cannot adjust because the institutions are too rigid, or because the ways in which we work cannot be changed that easily, then it is a disaster, because there is conflict. There is lots of conflict that goes on. So I'm just saying this not because I simply want to play the devil's advocate, but to give the full picture, because it seems just so easy. You pass the relay to the citizens and the citizens are programming for you. It's not really about that.
No. Well, it would never be about that, but well, any experimental practice is risky and is going to be tiring for those who do it, and also may produce conflict, and probably will produce conflict within the institution, because there will always be people who are more conservative and those who wish to open up to different publics and confront different issues in a more open, or let's say democratic way. And the issue about money, of course, in a country like Italy, where culture and most cultural operators and young people working in cultural institutions are so badly paid, if they are paid at all, it would be no new thing. But apart from all these considerations, I do think that the need for museums to open up to different publics and to different audiences is fundamental and is absolutely necessary now. And we can see that at this moment in time, especially after the COVID-19, and it's more and more important for there to be a cultural debate about our future, about the way we want to live our future, and the decisions that we will have to make very soon about the economy, about so many other priorities. And I think it would be very important. I think what you are doing in the museums or in the cultural world is certainly important for how, as a direction that I think the public debate and the cultural debate should take. So, well, we'll leave it here for today, and thank you very much, Viviana, and good luck with your work, and talk again soon, maybe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you.